Marcus Chin stepped off the transport shuttle onto what the Galactic Council called Designation Omega-7, though everyone else simply called it Hell's Garden. The name fit. Purple-tinged atmosphere hung thick around towering crystal formations that hummed with deadly energy. In the distance, something that looked like a cross between a tornado and a living creature carved through a forest of metal trees. "Welcome to your trial, human," announced Kethvar, the reptilian assessor whose scales shifted color with his mood. Currently, they displayed a sickly yellow-green that Marcus had learned meant either amusement or contempt. "You have 72 standard hours to reach the beacon on the far side of this continent. The distance is approximately 400 kilometers through terrain that has killed 63% of all participants." Marcus adjusted the straps of his worn backpack and looked around at the other trial candidates. A Zeltharian warrior in full combat armor clicked his mandibles nervously. Two crystalline entities floated nearby, their translucent bodies already adapting to the local energy frequencies. A pack of Vorthak hunters tested their bioweapons while their leader barked orders in their guttural language. Everyone had equipment. Lots of equipment. "Weapons?" Kethvar asked, scanning his tablet. "Don't need any," Marcus replied, checking his bootlaces. The assessor's scales flickered to confused orange. Survival gear? Environmental suits? Emergency rations? Marcus patted his backpack. "Got some jerky, a water bottle, and a sleeping bag. Should be enough." A chorus of clicks, hisses, and electronic buzzes erupted from the other candidates. The Zeltharian warrior translated for those who didn't speak standard Galactic. He says he only brought camping gear. "This is a Deathworld trial," Kethvar emphasized, his scales now cycling through multiple colors. Class 9 mortality rating. The atmosphere contains 17 different toxins. The local fauna includes apex predators that hunt in packs. The weather systems generate electromagnetic storms that can fry most electronics. Marcus shrugged. "Feels like camping to me." The crystalline entities chimed together, their harmonics creating a sound like breaking glass mixed with laughter. Their translation device crackled. The carbon-based life form appears to be experiencing cognitive malfunction. "Let me explain," Kethvar continued, clearly flustered. Previous successful candidates required atmospheric processors, kinetic barriers, plasma weaponry, emergency medical systems, and, at minimum, a 3-person support team. "You're suggesting you can survive with recreational camping supplies?" "Well," Marcus said, looking up at the alien sky where 2 suns cast harsh shadows through the poisonous clouds, "I did bring a hat." He pulled a faded baseball cap from his pocket and settled it on his head. The logo read "World's Greatest Dad" in letters so worn they were barely visible. The Vorthak pack leader snarled something that their translator rendered as, "The small flesh thing mocks the sacred trial." "I'm not mocking anything," Marcus assured them. "I'm just saying this reminds me of a camping trip I took with my daughter in the Mojave Desert. Hot, dry, lots of things trying to kill you. We had a great time." Kethvar's scales had settled into a deep purple that Marcus suspected meant he was getting a headache. "Human, I am required by galactic law to ensure you understand the stakes. This trial determines whether your species will be granted membership in the Galactic Council. Failure means humanity remains quarantined to your home system indefinitely." "I get it," Marcus nodded. "Big responsibility. Don't worry, I won't let you down." A harsh siren wailed across the starting area. Kethvar straightened and his scales shifted to official bureaucratic gray. "Trial candidates, you have 30 seconds to make final preparations before the barrier drops." The other candidates burst into frenzied activity. Weapons powered up, armor systems activated, and team leaders shouted last-minute instructions. The crystalline entities synchronized their frequencies while the Zeltharian performed some kind of ritual combat dance. Marcus took off his backpack, pulled out a stick of jerky, and took a bite. The artificial meat substitute tasted exactly like the hiking food his daughter had complained about during their last camping trip together. He smiled at the memory. 10 seconds. Kethvar announced. Marcus slung his pack back on and looked ahead at the twisted landscape that stretched to the horizon. Somewhere out there, past the crystal formations and metal forests, past whatever nightmares this world had evolved, a beacon waited. 400 kilometers didn't sound too bad. He'd hiked further than that plenty of times. Begin! The barrier dropped with a sound like reality tearing. The other candidates charged forward in a coordinated rush, their equipment humming and weapons ready. Marcus started walking at a comfortable pace, hands in his pockets, whistling an old song his father had taught him during their fishing trips. The Zeltharian warrior reached the first crystal formation and immediately triggered some kind of defense mechanism. Purple energy lanced out, striking his armor and sending him tumbling. He rolled behind cover, shouting warnings to the others. The crystalline entities tried to float over the crystals but discovered that the formations generated an interference field that disrupted their cohesion. They were forced to retreat and find another route. The Vortak pack spread out and began systematically testing different approaches, their bioweapons probing for weaknesses in the crystal defense grid. Marcus walked straight toward the largest crystal formation, the one that everyone else was carefully avoiding. As he got closer, he could hear it humming, a deep thrumming that seemed to resonate in his bones. Purple energy crackled along its surface, and he could smell ozone in the air. He stopped about 10 feet away and studied the crystal carefully. It was beautiful, really. The way the light refracted through its faceted surface created patterns that shifted and danced. It reminded him of the geodes his daughter had collected during their trip to Arkansas. "You're pretty," he told the crystal. "But I bet you're just trying to protect yourself, aren't you?" The crystal's humming changed pitch slightly, becoming less aggressive. Marcus noticed something the others had missed. Around the base of the formation, worn smooth by countless years of wind and weather, was a narrow path. It wasn't marked on any map, and it was barely visible unless you knew what to look for. But Marcus had spent enough time hiking to recognize a game trail when he saw one. He started down the path, moving slowly and keeping his hands visible. The crystal's energy field brushed against him, making his skin tingle, but nothing more aggressive happened. As he walked deeper into the formation, he began to understand. The crystals weren't weapons. They were a nervous system. The entire formation was alive, in a way. Not conscious like an animal, but aware like a forest. It could sense intent, emotion, aggression. The other candidates had approached it like an obstacle to overcome, a challenge to defeat. So it had defended itself. Marcus approached it like what it was, a living thing that had been here long before any of them arrived, and would be here long after they left. "Sorry for the intrusion," he said quietly as he walked through the heart of the formation. "Just passing through." The crystals hummed around him, a sound that was almost like singing. Purple light danced along their surfaces, but gently now, like aurora rather than lightning. When he emerged on the far side, Marcus looked back to see the other candidates still struggling with their technological solutions. The Zeltharian had deployed some kind of siege engine. The crystallines were trying to hack the energy field frequency. The Vortak pack was setting up what looked like a mining operation. Marcus checked his watch. He'd been walking for about an hour and had covered maybe 8 kilometers. At this rate, he'd reached the beacon with time to spare. He pulled out his water bottle, took a careful sip, and looked ahead at the next obstacle, a forest of metal trees that gleamed like mirrors in the alien sunlight. Between their trunks, he could see movement. Lots of movement. "Well, Dad," he said to himself, using the voice he'd always used when talking to his father during their outdoor adventures, "looks like we're about to meet the locals." A sound echoed from the metal forest ahead. It was part roar, part screech, and part something that might have been laughter if laughter could be made out of knives and hunger. Marcus adjusted his baseball cap, shifted his backpack to a more comfortable position, and started walking toward the sound. Behind him, he could hear explosions as the other candidates continued their assault on the crystal formation. Just like camping, he reminded himself, though he was pretty sure the Mojave Desert had never tried to eat him. Then, again, his daughter had always said he had a talent for understatement. The metal forest grew larger as he approached, its mirror-bright trees reflecting distorted images of the purple sky. Between the reflections, shapes moved with predatory grace. Marcus could smell something on the wind now, something wild and electric and dangerous. He smiled. This was going to be interesting. Behind him, a massive explosion echoed across the crystal formation as someone finally broke through with brute force. Marcus didn't look back. He had a beacon to reach, and something told him the real adventure was just beginning. As he entered the shadow of the first metal tree, Marcus Chen, representative of humanity in the Galactic Council trials, began to whistle again. It was an old tune, something about taking country roads home. The sounds from deeper in the forest grew closer, more curious now than threatening. Whatever was in there, it was coming to investigate the strange creature that walked through a Deathworld like he was strolling through a park. Marcus kept whistling and kept walking. After all, it felt just like camping. The metal forest felt like walking inside a kaleidoscope. Every surface reflected and refracted light until Marcus couldn't tell which way was up. The trees weren't exactly trees, more like crystalline growths that had learned to mimic organic shapes. Their surfaces rang like wind chimes when the breeze touched them, creating an eerie melody that seemed to follow him deeper into the maze. Marcus had been walking for 2 hours when he first saw them. Eyes. Hundreds of them, watching from between the reflective branches. They didn't blink, and they tracked his movement with unnerving precision. "Well, hello there," Marcus said, not slowing his pace. He'd learned long ago that showing fear around wild animals was like sending them an engraved invitation to dinner with yourself as the main course. A low rumble answered him from somewhere above. Then, another from his left. And another from behind. Marcus stopped and looked around carefully. The reflections made it impossible to get an accurate count, but he estimated at least 20 creatures surrounding him. Big ones, judging by the sound. In the distorted mirror surfaces, he caught glimpses of sleek forms, powerful muscles, and teeth that gleamed like polished metal. Pack hunters, he observed aloud. Smart ones too. You've been tracking me since I entered the forest, haven't you? A different sound now, something between a purr and a growl. Curious rather than aggressive. Marcus set down his backpack and slowly pulled out his water bottle. The creatures went silent, watching his every movement. He took a drink, recapped the bottle, and sat down cross-legged on the forest floor. "You know," he said conversationally, "this reminds me of a camping trip I took with my brother when we were kids. We were hiking in Yellowstone, and we suddenly realized we were being followed by a pack of wolves." The eyes moved closer. Still watching. Still waiting. My brother wanted to run. I wanted to climb a tree. Dad had told us all about how dangerous wolves could be. Marcus smiled at the memory. But, you know what we did instead? We sat down and ate our lunch. Just sat there, eating sandwiches, while 6 wolves watched us from about 30 feet away. One of the creatures emerged from the reflections. It was magnificent, about the size of a lion, but built like a cross between a big cat and a lizard. Its hide was dark gray with silver markings that shifted and flowed like liquid metal. Intelligence gleamed in its large, golden eyes. Turns out, Marcus continued, pulling the jerky from his pack, they weren't hunting us. They were just curious. Pack of juveniles who'd never seen humans before. They wanted to know what we were. The creature tilted its head, studying Marcus with obvious interest. Others began emerging from the mirror maze, forming a loose circle around him. All young adults, Marcus noted. All curious rather than hostile. "Same as you, I'd guess," Marcus said, tearing off a piece of jerky. "You've never seen anything quite like a human before, have you?" The nearest creature made a sound like wind through metal chimes, questioning, almost musical. Marcus held out the piece of jerky. "Want to try some? It's artificial beef. Pretty terrible, actually, but it's got protein." The creature approached slowly, its movements liquid and graceful. It sniffed at the jerky, then at Marcus's hand. Its nose was warm and slightly damp, like a dog's. "There you go," Marcus encouraged as the creature delicately took the jerky from his fingers. "Not so scary, are we?" The creature chewed thoughtfully, then made a sound that was definitely approval. The others moved closer, emboldened by their packmates' success. "Sorry, guys," Marcus said, showing his nearly empty bag. "That's about all the jerky I can spare. I've got 3 more days of hiking ahead of me." The creatures exchanged a series of musical chimes and growls. Marcus got the impression they were discussing something important. The leader, he was sure it was the leader now, approached him again and gently grabbed his sleeve with its teeth. "You want me to follow you?" Marcus asked. The creature released his sleeve and walked a few steps away, then looked back expectantly. Marcus considered his options. Following a pack of unknown predators deeper into an alien forest wasn't exactly standard survival protocol. On the other hand, these creatures knew the terrain better than any map could show him. And they'd had multiple opportunities to attack him if that had been their intent. "All right," he decided, standing up and shouldering his pack. "Lead the way." The pack moved through the metal forest like they were dancing. They flowed between the reflective trees with perfect grace, never hesitating, never hitting a dead end. Marcus followed as best he could, though he felt clumsy and loud compared to their fluid motion. After an hour of travel, they emerged into a clearing where the metal trees gave way to something even stranger, a garden of living crystals that pulsed with soft, warm light. At the center of the clearing was a pool of water so clear it looked like liquid diamond. The pack leader approached the pool and lapped at the water, then looked at Marcus expectantly. "Is it safe?" Marcus asked. The creature chimed softly and took another drink. Marcus knelt by the pool and cupped some water in his hands. It was cool and pure, with no smell or taste of chemicals. He drank carefully, ready to stop at the first sign of trouble, but the water went down smooth and clean. "Thank you," he told the pack. "This saves me about a day's worth of rationing." The creatures settled around the clearing, clearly planning to rest. Marcus checked his watch. He'd been walking for 5 hours and covered about 40 kilometers. He was making better time than expected, thanks to his guides. He found a comfortable spot against one of the crystal formations and settled in for a break. The crystal was warm against his back, and its gentle pulsing was surprisingly soothing. Several of the younger pack members curled up nearby, their silver markings dimming as they relaxed. "You know what this is?" Marcus asked the pack leader, who was keeping watch from a small rise. "This is what camping is supposed to be about. Finding your place in the natural world, not conquering it." The leader's ears perked up at his voice, though Marcus was sure it couldn't understand his words. "The other candidates back there," Marcus continued, "they're treating this like a war. They brought enough firepower to level a city. But this world isn't their enemy, it's just different. Everything here has found a way to survive in a hostile environment. Including you guys." A distant explosion echoed through the forest. The pack members' heads shot up, alert and tense. "That would be the others," Marcus sighed. "Probably blowing up something else that was just trying to live its life." More explosions followed, accompanied by the high whine of energy weapons. The pack leader approached Marcus, chiming urgently. "They're scaring the whole ecosystem," Marcus realized. "That's what you're trying to tell me, isn't it? All that violence is disrupting the balance here." The leader nodded, actually nodded, like it understood exactly what Marcus was saying. "Well," Marcus said, standing up and shouldering his pack again, "let's get moving then. The sooner I reach that beacon, the sooner this trial ends and your forest can have some peace." The pack moved faster now, urgency driving them through terrain that became increasingly challenging. They crossed rushing streams on fallen crystal logs, navigated around geysers of superheated gas, and skirted the edges of electromagnetic storm cells that could fry any piece of advanced technology. Marcus followed without question. These creatures had lived here for who knows how long. They knew every safe path, every danger to avoid, every shortcut through the maze of alien wilderness. As the first sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that had no names in any human language, the pack brought him to the edge of the metal forest. Beyond stretched a vast plain of black sand, dotted with what looked like islands of solid stone floating several feet above the ground. "Gravity anomalies," Marcus observed. "This is where it gets really interesting." The pack leader approached him one last time and gently touched its nose to his hand. The others gathered around, chiming their musical farewells. "Thank you," Marcus said simply. "All of you. You didn't have to help a stranger, but you did. That says something important about who you are." The leader tilted its head and made a sound that was almost like a question. "Whether we'll see each other again?" Marcus guessed. "I hope so. When this is all over, when humanity joins the Galactic Council, maybe we can come back and do this properly. Learn about your world, your pack, your way of life. As friends, not as conquerors." The creature seemed to understand. It chimed once more, then led its pack back into the forest, leaving Marcus alone at the edge of the floating stone field. He checked his watch again. 18 hours into the trial, and he'd covered about 60 kilometers. The beacon was still 340 kilometers away, but he was ahead of schedule and feeling good. Time to figure out how to navigate a gravity field, he told himself, studying the floating stones. Wonder if they're stable enough to walk on? Behind him, the metal forest chimed softly in the evening breeze, a sound like a lullaby sung by the world itself. Ahead of him, the floating islands cast strange shadows on the black sand, patterns that shifted and danced as the alien moons began to rise. Marcus Chen, humanity's representative in a trial that would determine his species' future, adjusted his baseball cap and took his first steps onto the impossible terrain. The gravity pulled at him strangely, making his stomach lurch, but he found his balance and kept walking. After all, it still felt like camping. Just camping on a world where physics had decided to get creative. The floating stone islands defied everything Marcus knew about physics. Some hovered 3 feet off the ground, others floated at eye level, and a few drifted so high he had to crane his neck to see them. The gravity field between them pulled in different directions, making his inner ear complain with every step. Marcus learned quickly that the black sand beneath the stones was more than just volcanic glass, it was some kind of smart matter that reacted to electromagnetic fields. Every time he stepped on it, ripples of silver light spread outward from his feet like he was walking on a liquid mirror. The stones must be generating localized gravity wells, he reasoned aloud, his voice echoing strangely in the warped space. And the sand responds to the field fluctuations. He'd been experimenting with different approaches for an hour when he discovered something interesting. If he moved slowly and kept his electromagnetic signature low, no sudden movements, no metal-on-metal contact, even breathing steady and calm, the gravity fields remained stable. The stones continued their lazy drift, but they didn't suddenly lurch in unexpected directions. "You're not obstacles," Marcus realized, watching a particularly large island float past its shoulder height. "You're a transportation system." He timed the next stone's approach carefully, then stepped onto its surface as it drifted by. His stomach lurched as the gravity field enveloped him, but the sensation quickly settled into something like floating in deep water. The stone carried him forward across the plain at a steady walking pace. From his elevated position, Marcus could see the full scope of the floating island field. Hundreds of stones drifted in complex patterns, their paths crisscrossing like a three-dimensional highway system. In the distance, he spotted movement, one of the other trial candidates trying to blast their way through the gravity fields with some kind of hover vehicle. The results were spectacular and catastrophic. The vehicle's engines destabilized the entire local field, sending dozens of stones spinning wildly through the air. The candidate barely escaped before their vehicle was crushed between 2 colliding islands. Marcus shook his head and focused on his own journey. He learned to read the flow patterns, to step from one stone to another at just the right moment, to use his body weight to influence their direction slightly. It was like surfing, if surfing involved three-dimensional space and impossible physics. Hours passed in meditative travel. The alien moons rose higher, casting the floating islands in cold silver light that made the whole plain look like a dream. Marcus found himself thinking about his daughter, Sarah, and the summer they'd spent learning to sail on Lake Michigan. She'd been frustrated at first, wanting to fight the wind and force the boat to go where she wanted. But eventually, she'd learned to work with the natural forces, to read the water and the air and find harmony with both. Same principle applies here, kiddo, Marcus murmured to himself as he stepped onto another drifting stone. Don't fight the world, dance with it. A sound ahead caught his attention, not the rumble of explosions this time, but something like singing. As his current stone carried him closer to the source, Marcus saw something that made him stop and stare. A cluster of the floating islands had arranged themselves in a perfect spiral formation, rising from ground level to about 50 feet high. And, moving between them, flowing like music made visible, were creatures unlike anything he'd ever imagined. They looked like living ribbons of light, translucent and graceful, each one about 10 feet long and glowing with soft bioluminescence. They moved through the gravity fields like they were swimming through liquid starlight, their forms rippling and pulsing in complex patterns. Air dancers, Marcus breathed, watching them weave between the stones in elaborate choreography. One of the creatures noticed him and approached, its form shifting from silver to pale blue as it drew near. It circled his stone platform in a graceful spiral, then sang, and it was definitely singing, a sound like crystal bells mixed with ocean waves. "Hello," Marcus said softly. "You're beautiful. Are you the ones maintaining this whole system?" More dancers appeared, drawn by their companion's song. Soon Marcus's stone was surrounded by a constellation of living light, each creature pulsing in harmony with the others. Their song grew more complex, creating harmonies that seemed to resonate directly in his bones. The stone he was riding began to move differently, no longer drifting randomly but following a specific path through the island field. The dancers were guiding him, Marcus realized, showing him the optimal route through their domain. "Thank you," he said, though he suspected they understood intention and emotion better than words. The guided journey was unlike anything from his camping experiences. The dancers led him through the most beautiful parts of their aerial realm, past islands covered in crystalline gardens, through spaces where the gravity fields created aurora-like displays of colored light, around formation of stones that rang like massive bells when the wind touched them. At one point, the route took him close to another trial candidate, one of the crystalline entities, hovering motionlessly about 30 feet away. Its translucent body was flickering erratically, and Marcus could see stress fractures running through its crystalline matrix. "Its harmonics are all wrong," Marcus called out to the dancers. "It's trying to match your frequency, but it's not built for this kind of complexity." The nearest dancer pulsed thoughtfully, then flowed over toward the struggling crystalline. It began a simpler song, something the alien entity could actually resonate with. Gradually, the crystalline's flickering stabilized and its stress fractures began to heal. Together, the dancer and the crystalline entity found a harmonic frequency that worked for both of them. The crystalline couldn't match the dancer's grace, but it could move safely through the gravity fields without causing disruptions. Marcus watched the unlikely pair work together and smiled. This was what the Galactic Council trials were supposed to be about, not proving dominance, but demonstrating the ability to find cooperation and understanding across species barriers. His guided tour continued for several more hours, carrying him deep into the heart of the floating island field. The dancers showed him wonders that would have been impossible to find alone, hidden grottos where new stones were somehow being born from crystallized gravity, amphitheaters where the song of 100 dancers created visible music in the air, nurseries where young dancers learned their first flights between protective rings of stable stones. As the second sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the dancers brought Marcus to the far edge of their territory. Beyond the last floating island stretched a new landscape, rolling hills covered in what looked like metallic grass, studded with structures that might have been trees or buildings or something entirely different. The lead dancer approached him one final time, its form shifting through the entire visible spectrum as it sang a complex farewell melody. Then, it touched its ethereal body to his forehead, and, for just a moment, Marcus felt what it was like to swim through space itself, to ride gravity like a surfer rides waves, to see the universe as an ocean of force and energy and endless possibility. When the sensation faded, the dancer drew back and pulsed once more in farewell. Then, it and its companions float away, returning to their eternal dance among the floating stones. Marcus stood on the last stable island, looking out at the metallic grasslands ahead. According to his calculations, he was now about halfway to the beacon, 200 kilometers covered in 36 hours, with 36 hours remaining. He shouldered his pack and checked his water supply. Still good, though he'd need to find more soon. The jerky was holding out fine, and his sleeping bag was still dry and ready for use. Halfway there, he announced to the morning air. And still feels like camping. A distant explosion echoed from somewhere behind him, followed by the whine of military-grade weapons. The other candidates were still fighting their way through challenges that Marcus had learned to dance around. He thought about his daughter again, and the last camping trip they'd taken before she'd left for college. She'd been worried about going out into the world alone, unsure if she had what it took to succeed in a competitive universe. You don't have to be the strongest or the smartest or the best equipped, he'd told her around their campfire that night. You just have to be willing to see the world as it really is, and find your place in it. Everything else will work itself out. Marcus stepped down from the floating island onto solid ground and started walking across the metallic grassland. The strange vegetation chimed softly as his boots brushed through it, creating a gentle percussion that seemed to welcome him to this new part of the world. Behind him, the dancers continued their eternal ballet among the floating stones. Ahead of him, new wonders and new challenges waited. And, somewhere beyond all of it, a beacon marked the end of a journey that would determine humanity's place in a vast and complex galaxy. Marcus Chen adjusted his baseball cap, shifted his pack to a more comfortable position, and kept walking. The metallic grass sang around his feet, the alien suns painted impossible colors across the sky, and, in the distance, something large and graceful moved among the tree-like structures. It still felt like camping. The best kind of camping, where every step brought new discoveries, new friends, and new understanding of just how beautiful and strange the universe could be when you approached it with curiosity instead of conquest. The metallic grassland stretched for kilometers, and, with each step Marcus took, the vegetation around him created a symphony of gentle chimes and whispers. The grass wasn't really grass at all, he discovered each blade was a delicate crystal formation that resonated with sound and movement. Walking through it was like walking through a musical instrument the size of a prairie. The tree-like structures he'd seen from a distance turned out to be even stranger up close. They were geometric rather than organic, made of the same resonant crystal as the grass but grown into complex architectural forms. Some looked like spiral towers, others like interlocking spheres, and a few resembled abstract sculptures that seemed to shift shape when he wasn't looking directly at them. Marcus paused beside one of the larger structures, a twisted helix about 20 feet tall that hummed with deep harmonic frequencies. As he approached, sections of its surface became transparent, revealing a hollow interior filled with swirling patterns of light. "You're not trees," he said, reaching out to touch the smooth crystal surface. "You're some kind of processing units. Maybe memory storage? Or communication nodes?" The structure responded to his touch by shifting its harmonic frequency to match his voice. The swirling lights inside began pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. A sound behind him made Marcus turn. Emerging from another cluster of crystal structures was one of the other trial candidates, the Zeltharian warrior, though his impressive armor was now scarred and blackened from multiple encounters with the Deathworld's various defense systems. "Human," the warrior clicked, his mandibles spread in what Marcus had learned was a gesture of exhaustion rather than aggression. That is, what equipment are you using to navigate this landscape?" Marcus held up his hands, showing empty palms. "Just listening to what it's trying to tell me." The Zeltharian's compound eyes focused on Marcus's minimal gear, the worn backpack, the faded baseball cap, the simple hiking clothes. "Impossible. My armor's sensors indicate toxic atmospheric content, dangerous electromagnetic fluctuations, and hostile wildlife throughout this sector. Without proper protective equipment." "The atmosphere's fine if you don't stress about it," Marcus interrupted gently. "Your armor's probably reacting to trace elements that aren't actually harmful to carbon-based life." "And the electromagnetic stuff?" "That's just how the crystal formations communicate." To demonstrate, Marcus placed both hands on the crystal structure beside him. It responded by creating a visible light pattern that flowed outward across the metallic grass, connecting with other structures in a network of soft illumination. "See? They're not trying to hurt anyone. They're just talking." The Zeltharian approached cautiously, his armor's warning systems beeping frantically. "My equipment indicates extreme danger from direct contact with unknown xenobiology." "Your equipment's scared," Marcus observed. "It's designed to identify threats, so everything unknown registers as dangerous." But, look around you, do you see any actual evidence of hostility? The warrior paused, his training warring with observation. The crystal prairie around them was peaceful, beautiful even. The harmonic frequencies were soothing rather than threatening, and the light patterns flowing between structures had an almost musical quality. My species has protocols for Deathworld exploration, the Zeltharian said slowly. Maximum protection, overwhelming firepower, rapid extraction if threatened. And, how's that working out for you? Marcus asked, noting the damage to the warrior's equipment. The Zeltharian's mandibles drooped. I have lost 60% of my gear fighting obstacles that may not have been obstacles at all. Marcus nodded sympathetically. Want to walk with me for a while? I'm heading toward that ridgeline, looks like good visibility from up there to plan the final approach to the beacon. The warrior hesitated, then began powering down his armor's active defense systems. My tactical doctrine says this is inadvisable. Sometimes doctrine needs updating, Marcus replied, starting to walk toward the distant hills. I'm betting your ancestors didn't always fight everything they encountered. How do you think they made first contact with other species? Carefully, the Zeltharian admitted, falling into step beside Marcus. His unpowered armor was quieter, no longer broadcasting electromagnetic signatures that made the crystal grass recoil from his passage. They walked together across the singing prairie, an unlikely pair, the human with his camping gear and the alien warrior in damaged battle armor. As they traveled, the Zeltharian began to relax, his natural curiosity overcoming years of military conditioning. The resonance patterns, he observed after an hour of walking. They are not random. There is a mathematical progression, almost like language, Marcus agreed. The whole ecosystem is one big conversation. We're just walking through the middle of it. They crested the first ridge as the suns reached their zenith, and the view that spread before them took both their breaths away. The metallic prairie flowed down into a vast valley filled with crystal formations that rose like a city of living architecture. At the center, surrounded by concentric rings of increasingly complex structures, stood a spire that reached so high its peak was lost in the purple clouds. The beacon, the Zeltharian breathed. The beacon, Marcus agreed. About 40 kilometers from here. We can make it by tonight if we keep up a good pace. But, as they descended toward the Crystal City, they encountered the other trial candidates. All of them, gathered at the valley's edge in various states of technological desperation. The crystalline entities had somehow destabilized their matrix harmonics and were flickering like dying stars. The Vortak pack leader was arguing with his subordinates in their guttural language while their bioweapons twitched and sparked from overuse. And, presiding over the chaos was Assessor Kethvar, his scales cycling through every color Marcus had ever seen and a few that probably didn't have names. Ah, human Marcus, Kethvar called out, his voice carrying a note of barely controlled frustration. Perhaps you can explain how you have covered 250 kilometers through Class 9 Deathworld terrain in 48 hours while maintaining optimal health indicators? Marcus looked around at the assembled candidates, all of whom were staring at him with expressions ranging from disbelief to outright hostility. I walked here. You walked, one of the crystalline entities buzzed through its translation matrix. Through toxic atmosphere, hostile wildlife, electromagnetic storms, gravity anomalies, and psychotropic vegetation fields. With camping equipment. The atmosphere's not toxic if you don't fight it, Marcus explained patiently. The wildlife isn't hostile if you're not hostile first. The electromagnetic storms are just how the local geology communicates. The gravity anomalies are a transportation system. And the vegetation isn't psychotropic, it's empathic. It responds to emotional states. Empathic vegetation, Kethvar repeated slowly, his scales settling into a color that suggested either deep thought or complete mental breakdown. Everything here is connected, Marcus continued, looking out at the crystal city below them. The whole planet is basically one big ecosystem that's evolved to work together. It only seems dangerous if you assume it's trying to hurt you. The Vortak pack leader snarled something that the universal translator rendered as, the soft flesh speaks of harmony while we bleed from crystal cuts and energy burns. Because you've been fighting a war against an opponent that doesn't exist, Marcus pointed out. You brought weapons to what was actually a conversation. He turned to address all the candidates directly. This isn't a survival trial. It's a compatibility test. The Galactic Council doesn't want to know if we can conquer a hostile environment, they want to know if we can recognize a complex ecosystem and find our place in it without destroying everything around us. Silence fell over the group. In the distance, the crystal city hummed with subtle harmonics, its spires catching and refracting the alien sunlight into patterns that seemed almost like writing. The beacon isn't just a destination, Marcus realized aloud. It's the heart of the planetary consciousness. The whole trial is about whether we can approach it with respect instead of force. The Zeltharian warrior stepped forward, his damaged armor reflecting the colorful light from the crystal formations. If you are correct, human Marcus, then this trial is fundamentally different from what we were told to expect. Maybe that's the point, Marcus suggested. Maybe the real test is whether we can adapt our assumptions when reality doesn't match our expectations. Cathvar's scales had settled into a deep, thoughtful blue. Proceed to the beacon, candidates. All of you. Together. The group began making their way down into the Crystal Valley, but now their approach was different. Instead of advancing with weapons ready and defenses active, they moved slowly, carefully, observing rather than threatening. The Crystal City welcomed them. Pathways of light appeared in the resonant structures, guiding them toward the central spire. Musical harmonics flowed around them like a gentle current, carrying information that bypassed language and spoke directly to intention and emotion. Marcus found himself walking beside creatures from half a dozen different worlds, all of them united in wonder at the alien beauty surrounding them. The crystalline entities synchronized their frequencies with the city's harmonics and began to heal from their earlier damage. The Vortak Pack discovered that their bioweapons could interface with the crystal structures in non-destructive ways, creating new forms of artistic expression. The Zeltharian warrior's armor adapted its protocols to work in harmony with rather than opposition to the local environment. As they reached the base of the central spire, Marcus looked up at the beacon high above them. It pulsed with warm, welcoming light that seemed to say, "Welcome. You understand. You belong here." 68 hours, Cathvar announced, checking his chronometer. Trial complete. All candidates successfully reached the beacon. All candidates, the Vortak leader questioned. Success was never about reaching the beacon first, Cathvar explained, his scales now displaying what Marcus was pretty sure was profound relief. Success was about reaching it with understanding. About proving that your species could join the galactic community without destroying the communities that were already here. Marcus pulled out his water bottle and took a long drink, looking around at his fellow trial candidates who were no longer competitors but companions. They'd all learned the same lesson, just by different paths. "So what now?" asked one of the crystalline entities. "Now we go home and tell our people what we learned here," Marcus replied, adjusting his baseball cap one final time. "We tell them that the galaxy isn't something to be conquered. It's something to be joined. And that the strongest survival skill anyone can have is the ability to listen to what the universe is trying to teach them." As transport shuttles descended from the purple sky to collect the successful candidates, Marcus looked back at the Crystal City one last time. Somewhere in those singing spires, new harmonics were being born, patterns that included the voices and frequencies of 6 different species learning to communicate with a 7th. "Still feels like camping," he said to himself, smiling as he climbed aboard the shuttle that would take him home to his daughter, to his world, and to humanity's new place among the stars. The best kind of camping of all, the kind where you came home with new friends, new stories, and a whole new understanding of just how vast and welcoming the universe could be when you approached it with an open heart instead of a closed fist.